You were speaking about like the direction that society is going into with the persona being now almost an external thing on the internet. Does that also go along with a stronger suppression of emotions, or is are they unrelated?
Well, what there is a basic strategy. One of the basic strategies talking about like dissociation or the leaving pattern to keep emotions down or under control is to spend much more time just thinking about everything. So generally when we're spending a lot of time on social media, it's very thought based. Emotions might be being triggered, and stuff like that, but we're kind of staying in this thought world. And when something's triggering us, it's like there's two kind of choices. We can either go into the heart and feel what's going on, or we kind of go into the mind and push back, and that's mostly what I see in our culture is people just go into the mind and push back, but they're not aware of that. We so during like the COVID times when a lot of people are in lockdown and measures, and they're spending even more time on the phone or more time, on social media, there's more dissociation and they're more out of their body. They're less in touch with with the feelings, just with the raw sense of a body. They're
Hmm.
less, and so it is getting worse, in my opinion. And furthermore, there's probably certainly negative mental health things which accrue from that, and quite possibly negative like physical health, just regular health things which are accruing from that.
Hmm.
It's like a huge thing that I see going on in the back of society, is particularly Western
Yeah.
society, that like no one is speaking about. No one is speaking about. You can go and read a lot of stuff about culture war, either for culture war and the rights of various people or whatever, or against culture war or whatever. But to me, a lot of what's going on in society, especially online, is really to do with dissociation from the body. That's all it's really to do with. That's the grand cause underneath it all. But no one's really got around to speaking about that yet. It's not really
Yeah.
recognized. We just see people as being like certain gender or ethnic groups as just being massively enraged, and
Yeah.
hammering out loads of don't do this and using all sorts of manipulative techniques.
This is
But
one thing
there
that
is
I,
a religion.
yeah,
Yeah.
it really, I would love to dig deeper into it, and because now what you're saying, I can relate to it a lot. So something that I would love to contribute to healing in the world is this. I would call it more like a dissociation from the connection with each other, like men and women starting to relate to each other, at least publicly, so on social media, as oppressors and victims, instead of thinking like, oh, we have our differences, and that's actually the strength. We how can we connect with each other and make a world that is just where both of us really shine. And the same happens indeed between races, uh, or between even political leanings, that people are starting to grow further and further apart, and it doesn't seem like the the aim of the conversation is to consolidate with each other anymore, or to find healing. It seems like it's just like pointing fingers at each other, and you have to change, and I that worries me a bit. And now what you say about dissociating from the body, it makes a lot of sense, because if you're not feeling that there is this rage going on inside of you, or this unresolved trauma, and you are really in your mind, yeah, and you're looking for somebody to blame. And if you can blame an entire group of people, like let's say men, um, then yeah, it's easier to believe that story, because an entire group is so strong compared to what you are feeling. And I've definitely been there as a teenager, that I would point at authority figures, or at culture in general, and think that they had wronged me, but it was just unresolved trauma, and I never felt my body, so I didn't know that there were things inside me that needed fixing. And then I read this sentence somewhere, and I don't know why it got to me. Um, it said, if you think that there's something wrong with like the entire world but you, then what's more likely, that every person is doing something wrong except you, or that there's something about your behavior that makes you feel that way? And that really like was like a slap in the face. I mean, like, wake up, you need to change yourself. You need to change how you relate to those people, not. And I would love to find a way to bring more of that, to bring more, yeah, introspection and connection. But it seems to be like the gap is getting wider and wider. It seems like indeed this urgent thing that is not really talked about often, because it's also a touchy subject, right? To get into that victim and oppressor story and say something else.
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it totally is. You know, there's more polarization going on in the world, but there's another aspect to it as well for me, which is like sometimes the world seems to just go into this more dialectical state where it's just a fucking great fight going on, you know, like, and and maybe that's part of it, part of how change happens as well, you know,
Mm.
sometimes. So, you know, it's not necessarily the case, I don't think, that every, you know, in an ideal world things just get healed, you know, the feminist can find the common ground with the kind of raging, kind of masculine, you
Mm-hmm.
know, unconscious male, or some agreement can happen and it looks beautiful and we feel good. But you know, our culture is also dynamic and changing. You know, it's a facet of human life that we don't know what the future fucking looks like. And most attempts to create a controlled future, such as like communist societies, have, whatever you think about them, good or bad, is historically they have failed. And
Yeah.
that humans have kind of pumped for the one that, even though it's more fucked up on the surface, offers some level of kind of like a future which is uncertain, which allows the possibility of something change and maybe
Right.
more exciting happening than just the same old party just telling you what to do forever, you know, and you're just kind of finding your girlfriend or husband and having your kids and living in your little flat, and it just goes round like that forever with no other development. You know, it's like we try and map out a future, each of us, that we think is good, but it may not work like that, and who knows really what the fuck's happening underneath anyway. You know, it's like, so, you know, these culture wars that are going on aren't necessarily, and the polarization isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean,
Mm.
it's a drag when we spend all day fucking angry about something we've read on the internet, or someone we know is like that, or some friend of ours now doesn't speak to us because we don't agree with some position they took and we both think we're right and they're not. You know, it's a drag on a personal level, but I mean, who the fuck knows at the end of the day also?
Right.
You know, no one really knows.
So, if I understand this correctly, you're kind of likening it to just being just like a breath cycle. It's like a cycle of order and chaos, and this is just like creating the next fertile soil for whatever order emerges out of it, which we don't know yet.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean,